Okay, so this is our raccoon. That can be your either your assignment or your extra credit if you like. There's a lot of lines going on here, and with most of the drawings, I usually start with a face when I draw an animal, just because once I get the face in the right place, then if I run out of paper, I run out of paper. But the face is the thing that people are going to look at. It's just kind of a natural thing humans do, is to look at the face. So we talked about a little bit about the uncovering as we go with the puffin. This is one that you can, if you like to uncover as you go, you can just start up here. There's a lot of fuzziness going on. I would just encourage you, you can try a couple different ways actually, but we'll just talk about how to get this face going. And when I draw any of these things, I try not to use the names of the noun of what it is, and I just try to focus on what shape it is we're drawing. So the first thing we notice about this shape is that it's tipped. There's an angle here. So these two shapes are tipped, and that means these two shapes need to be tipped. That means this part here needs to be tipped as well. So the whole thing is at an angle. And that's the same thing if you're drawing Wilson or Baloo. If they have their head tipped, everything that you draw on them should be tipped at pretty much the same angle. And it doesn't really create a problem. You just kind of have to keep track of how much things are tipped. I like to start right in here, drawing this animal, and then just kind of work my way out. And if we try to think about what it is to draw the snout of a raccoon who's looking right at you, the left side of our brain just goes, oh my gosh, what? But let's look at this shape. So we have this shape that's narrow at the top and gets rounder at the bottom, and then it flattens out across the bottom. And it's shaped a lot like a Hershey kiss. And if somebody asks you to draw a shape of a Hershey kiss, it's like, well, yeah, that seems way easier than drawing the nose of a raccoon that's looking at you. So the first thing that we could do is we could come down here and draw the shape of a Hershey kiss. And again, there's a couple different ways to approach this. The first time you draw it, you may end up hitting the nail right on the head, or you may end up saying, okay, that was a good learning experience. But you just start with this Hershey kiss shape. And then we have this black shape that comes around. And again, see how it's kind of fuzzy? It's kind of like the muzzle, like, I can't remember now, Wilson or Baloo, wherever they go gray. This is kind of how you integrate black against lighter. And a raccoon really technically is really gray here, but this is how you kind of integrate it. You just have marks that are some of the white in the dark and some of the dark in the white. So as I go around, I'm going to just make it a dotted line and bring that down around on the sides. Okay. And because they're just super light guidelines, they're really easy to change either way as you go. That one ended up a solid line. Now we'll use the same technique as we did for the chickadee. Is we draw a circle in here, and we draw a circle here. Remember, everything is going to have to be kind of tipped the same way. And then we draw a circle. And remember this, we draw a circle on the inside of the circle. And remember, we're not making a perfect, it doesn't have to be a perfect ring because we're just giving the hint that it's there. And then we definitely see those two little reflections in there. So make them a little bigger than you think they need to be. It's always easier to make them a little smaller. Now that kind of makes him look like he's looking up and to the left. But as we go along, we probably don't want those to be perfect circles. Once we shave them down to be not perfect circles, they won't look so much like eyeballs there. Okay, so now we've got those two shapes in there. That's a little bit of planning ahead to get black eyes in black fur. We also have this place here where the whiskers go from dark to light to dark, dark to light to dark. And we accomplish that by planning ahead here too a little bit. We need to have a pathway that goes right through that black spot. So we're just going to make a little pathway, or a couple little pathways. And this is saving these places so they don't, and I'll just do a couple here, so they do not get colored in. It's like you're just making a little highway in there. So then we go back and we start coloring in right up to that circle. And it doesn't matter, it doesn't have to be perfect because we're only showing that Yeah, there's a round edge to that shape there. And the fur grows this way. And we have a little bit of, actually you could probably do it this way. Light on dark and then dark on light. So it's going to look kind of fuzzy at the edge. And then you just color it in down to your little marks here. And then you just stop when you get to one of those. And over here, it's not quite so, the fur is shorter, so you don't have, this is longer fur, so you're going to see more of the dark and light integrated, kind of. But here, the fur is a little shorter on the nose, so it's not as important to make it look real fuzzy there. And then leaving that little white highway open there. And you could put as many of these as are on the picture, or you can just wing it. And some might be thick and thin. Whoops, I went over mine. But as long as you leave some of them open, and remember you do have the eraser shield to erase any places back in that might get covered up once you get one of those. And now I'll go back over to this part. We kind of have, it looks a little fuzzy, little zigzag on the top. That's probably where there's a little fur that comes down over the edge. But overall, it's kind of a round shape. And then there's cross-hatching there where it's darker underneath and then gets lighter at the top. And then a little bit of a dark place there just to show where one nostril might be. And I might just kind of hurry through this just because for the sake of the video. Then this is the place down here where we know it's dark, and it's kind of where we know that there's an opening there, but it's also a little furry. So little zigzags on top, just kind of scribbly scrap, and then a little thicker here. And then that gives you the idea that something's there. And then we're going to leave this spot kind of open. That's kind of a guideline to say, well, we need to leave this place white when we go to do this part. Okay, so then I would do the same thing over here, is color it all in. Then what you do is you continue this line here, and it goes from white to dark to light. And then you would do the same thing over there. We talked about on the chickadee tummy, when you have something really super fuzzy like this, we do, and again, you're just going to have to eyeball it and say, okay, we go about up to there, and that's about where that is. And then we have this shape tipped this way, and this shape tipped that way. So we want to make sure these things are lining up. Then we go back, and it's just a lot of scribbly lines. And here, light, dark, or I'm sorry, long, short, long, short. And then just work your way down to the middle. One of the things, and there are some pencil techniques that will help make this fur really believable. And there are some places on here where I think I use a marker on this so I don't get quite the same feel. With your pencil, if we just make lines like this very deliberately, they look exactly the same from end to end, blunt and blunt. But animals tend to have, their fur tends to be a little bit pointier on the ends, like especially a raccoon and dogs, just because they're always brushing up against things, and the tips of the fur get worn away by rocks and trees and the ground and just friction rubbing up against things. So we don't want these outside tips to look blunt like this. And if you take your pencil and just do a little, I'm doing these extra dark so they show up. You plant your pencil and then just do a little flick. You'll see the quality of your line has dramatically improved. It's blunt here where it's attached to their body, but it ends up in a really super nice point at the end. So as you're making this fur, make sure you're planting your pencil and just making a nice little flick, and it should be higher in the middle than lower on the ends. And then that will give it a really nice pointy look on the end, which is a little more of a natural look. And then this all goes out here, and then we do have the branch going up here. Another way to approach this as you're drawing it, I don't know if I have enough room to do the whole thing. When we look at this, we have some, I mean, you can uncover it if you want. You can just look back and forth if you want. Um, there's all these different methods that you can kind of work into. But we also have this basic shape here, which we just did here, that we could kind of outline like this. Then we have this, the shape of the body. Then we have the shape of the tree trunk, or the tree branch. Then we have the shape of the trunk. So we have these big pieces that if we wanted to, we could go back here and say, okay, if that's where that piece is, this one is going to go right about here, and we make ourselves a nice dotted line, and then maybe down around here. And then when we want to do the tree part, we can make a line coming down, say, okay, there's that. And then where does this branch go? And I'm kind of flying blind here because I can't see both pictures at the same time. And then we get everything kind of roughed in. Then we can go back and add some of the other details. And because they're very light dotted lines, we're not committing to them. Then we can go back. I would probably break this line up before I started putting fur on it. And then when you start doing the fur, you do some short, then do some long, because they kind of have an inner coat and an outer coat. And as you go along, and if those lines don't vanish, you could just erasing them. Shouldn't hurt your drawing. You just go back and add some more. Now this is the same thing as the chickadee. We don't have to fill in every single part because our brain finishes the picture. Our brain looks at it and says, well, it's a furry animal. We don't look at it and wonder why we haven't drawn all the fur. When it comes to this part here, we do want to come down. Actually, I'm going to reverse these. You'll want to come down and do it this way, and then very long fur coming down, and then you just choose your spot to make it look darker. And it doesn't have to be uniform, some little dark, little light in different places. Now the funniest part about this is when we look at what we know are the feet of the raccoon, if we get to that part, and I'm just going to do this, the left side of your brain will say, oh, it's raccoon feet, they look like little hands. And we might look at it once and say, well, they're just like fingers. And if we've always kind of drawn pet or animal paws like this, we kind of revert to that. But you can see that these are all really shaped weirdly. If I would have just showed you a picture of this and said, what is that? We might not have ever guessed that that was a raccoon paw. But it comes down, it's kind of a side view. We see a little bit of the pad here, and then a couple of the claws, and then a couple little marks to show that it's kind of gray. Here's another one. We see half the pad and half the claws, and because it's all very black on a raccoon, they all kind of blend together. And then this one almost has a couple different sections. We have this top section and then a lower section, and then we have the claws underneath. Don't be scared off by this multitude of lines. To do a crosshatch like this on the tree, if you want to, you can also, two choices. You can color in the tree darker here, and then lighter and lighter and lighter as you go. Or you can do this, and this can be very relaxing. Could be very meditative. Crosshatching this way, and then make sure you're stopping at the line so that the tree has a relatively straight edge here. Or you could make it look bumpy to start with. Crosshatching, and then going back again, maybe straight up and down. Again, crosshatching is just like controlled scribbling. But the more lines here, and then fewer lines as you get toward here, and then you'll have that illusion that it's going around. So two different ways to do it. And then the same with under the raccoon here. Darker with more lines here, and then fewer lines as you go up, but then it gets darker again because of the shadow under the raccoon. So that's the raccoon. You can draw it by looking back and forth. Oops. You can draw it by looking back and forth. I have seen students do it uncovering little bits. I don't know that I would uncover that little bit at a time. I would probably uncover that much so you could see the whole curve. but I would recommend starting with this, getting this shape in first, so that it's in a place where you want it to be, and then work your way out from it. Okay, let me see what on my notes, what else we had to cover today, or what we were supposed to talk about. All right, I think we covered everything. When it comes to Baloo's muzzle, we'll just flip this over. You have a dark, I can't remember if it's light to dark or dark to light. I think the muzzle was, like, if here was the nose, and it's light here. That looks like a pig nose, sorry. I would just make it go lighter, and then where it turns into dark, make sure it's a scrabbly line like that, a scraggly line, and maybe some dark in here, and then do a little fine erasing maybe to kind of show that it's gray, and then that can integrate the two. You don't want to end up with, like, this part is white and this part is dark, and then it looks there's a big contrast and it doesn't blend in. So you want to make sure you blend in light to dark and dark to light, so that you have a little bit more of that. Whoops, I didn't mean to make that mark. And then you can go back here and just very lightly make some marks. You can use your blender to soften it if you can't see definite marks too there. Okay, that should do it for our Raccoon and Baloo.